Hey everyone, welcome back to XRP Future Finance, the channel that breaks down what's really happening with XRP before the headlines catch up to the charts. And I need you to stay with me for this entire video, because today's setup is one of those rare moments where good news and bad price action are happening at the exact same time, and if you don't understand why, you could easily make the wrong move at exactly the wrong moment. So grab a coffee, settle in, because we're going deep on this one, level by level, number by number. Let's start with the headline number everyone's talking about. XRP dropped to $1.12 on Tuesday. Now on its own, that might not sound dramatic, but here's the detail that should catch your attention immediately. Bitcoin was flat that same day. Not down, not volatile, just flat. So while the market leader sat still, XRP quietly slipped lower on its own steam. That's not random noise, that's a signal. And in a few minutes I'm going to show you exactly where that weakness is coming from on the chart, so don't skip ahead. Here's something most traders overlook when they only glance at daily price. XRP tried to push higher, actually got up to $1.1507, which is basically knocking on the door of 1.15 resistance. But the door didn't open. Price got rejected almost immediately and rolled back down. On the chart, this created what's called a lower high, meaning the bounce topped out lower than the previous bounce. That's a subtle detail, but subtle details are exactly what separate traders who catch reversals early from traders who get caught off guard. Keep that pattern in mind, because we're going to come back to it. Now let's talk about where the real battle is happening, because this is the part with the most useful information in this entire video. The heaviest selling volume of the session hit right around $1.110, which was also the low of the day. Buyers actually showed up and defended that price, so it's not like the floor completely collapsed. But here's the twist that a lot of channels aren't telling you. Even though buyers defended that level, there was no real bounce afterward. Normally, when buyers step in hard at a low, you'd expect at least a short relief rally. That didn't happen here, and that tells us something important about how thin demand currently is, even at prices traders consider safe. So what does all of this actually mean when you zoom out? It means the market structure is quietly getting weaker underneath the surface, even while price looks like it's just sitting sideways. The zone between $1.14 and $1.15 has now rejected price more than once, and every single rejection adds more weight to that ceiling. Think of it like a lid on a pot. The more time steam pushes against it and fails, the more pressure needs to build before that lid finally pops off. Traders are calling this a stubborn supply zone, and stubborn really is the right word here. Now here's a number I want you to actually write down, because this is the single most useful piece of data in this whole breakdown. The 24-hour average trading volume sits at roughly 1.81 billion. If XRP closes above $1.15 with volume clearly above that number, that's not just a random price spike, that's a breakout with real participation behind it. Historically, breakouts backed by strong volume tend to hold far better than quiet, low-volume moves that fade within a few hours. So if you're the type who sets price alerts, this is exactly the one worth setting today. But XRP isn't struggling in isolation, and this next part matters more than people realize. The broader altcoin market is also cooling off a little. The CMC Altcoin Season Index slipped 2.08%, down to 47. When that index softens like this, it usually means money is rotating a bit more cautiously, with traders parking capital in safer positions instead of chasing smaller altcoins aggressively. And since XRP is one of the largest altcoins by market cap, it doesn't get to fully escape that pressure just because it has its own individual news story running in the background. And speaking of that news story, here's the twist that genuinely surprises a lot of people watching this space. Ripple secured a full MiCA license in the European Union on July 6th. Let that sink in for a second. That is a massive regulatory achievement, the kind of headline that under different circumstances could send a token sharply higher. Instead, the market barely reacted. So why didn't price move? Stick with me, because the answer here is honestly one of the most important lessons in this entire video. Analysts have pointed out something crucial. This license strengthens Ripple's business operations and widens where the company can legally operate across the entire European Union. But it doesn't directly inject new demand into the XRP token itself, at least not in the short term. That's a distinction every single holder needs to understand clearly, because good for Ripple the company and good for XRP the token are not automatically the same thing, even though the market often treats them like they are. This really is one of the biggest lessons happening in crypto markets right now. XRP's price action has become somewhat decoupled from headline news, at least in the short term. Traders are trading the chart in front of them, not the press release from 3 days ago. That doesn't mean the MiCA license is meaningless. Long-term, wider regulated access across Europe absolutely matters for adoption, for institutional trust, and for future partnerships. But short-term, price is being driven by pure technicals and overall market sentiment, and that's exactly why understanding support and resistance right now matters more than just reading headlines and assuming price will follow. So right now, XRP is essentially boxed in, consolidating tightly between support at $1.11 and resistance at $1.15. I want you to think of this like a spring being compressed. The tighter and longer price stays trapped between two levels, the bigger the eventual move tends to be once it finally breaks one side or the other. So, the real question isn't whether XRP moves, because it will. The real question is which direction it moves first, and honestly, that's going to be decided by whichever level cracks under pressure first. Now let's clear up some confusion, because this comes up in the comments every single month, and I want to make sure you never fall for it. There was a monthly escrow release of 1 billion XRP on July 1st. A lot of newer investors see that headline and immediately panic, assuming a billion tokens are about to flood the open market and crash the price. That is simply not how it works. This is a scheduled, well-known event that happens like clockwork every single month, and the majority of those released tokens typically get relocked right back into escrow almost immediately. That's exactly what happened this time too. No unusual selling pressure came from it at all, which honestly should be reassuring if that headline had you worried. Let's talk about sentiment for a second, because numbers only tell half the story. Right now, the mood among short-term traders is cautious, almost undecided, sitting right in that gray zone between fear and patience. That's actually pretty normal during a tight consolidation phase like this one. The traders who tend to get hurt the most in moments like this are the ones who force a decision out of boredom, jumping in just because they're tired of waiting, instead of waiting for price to actually confirm a direction with volume behind it. So where does all of this leave the near-term outlook? Right now it's neutral, leaning slightly bearish, as long as price stays capped below that $1.15 ceiling. But here's the flip side that's just as important to remember. As long as XRP continues holding above $1.11, the broader weekly uptrend that's been building over recent weeks is technically still intact. This isn't a broken chart sitting in front of us, it's a pause chart, and there's a real meaningful difference between those two situations. Now let's look ahead, because two major catalysts are sitting on the horizon that could shake this entire consolidation loose. The first is the Clarity Act, which remains a pending piece of regulatory legislation that the entire crypto market is watching closely right now. Regulatory clarity in the United States has been one of the biggest overhangs on crypto valuations for years, and any real concrete movement on this bill could shift sentiment quickly, in either direction, depending on exactly what the final language says. The second catalyst is something a lot of people are quietly sleeping on, and I think it deserves way more attention than it's getting. We're now looking at 9 consecutive weeks of positive ETF inflows. 9 weeks in a row is not a coincidence, that's a genuinely strong and consistent trend. Inflows like that represent real, sustained institutional demand building quietly in the background, even while the token's price sits sideways in a tight range. Sometimes accumulation happens exactly like this. Slow, boring, sideways price action on the surface while bigger players quietly build positions underneath before the next real move actually happens. Before we wrap up, let's put all these pieces together one more time, because clarity matters more than excitement here. On one side, you've got a clean technical rejection at $1.15, weakening market structure, and a cooling altcoin sector. On the other side, you've got a major EU regulatory win, 9 straight weeks of ETF inflows, and an uptrend that's still technically alive above $1.11. Both of these stories are true at the same time, and that's exactly why this market feels confusing right now if you're only looking at one side of it. So here's the bottom line to take away from today. Watch $1.11 as your line in the sand for support, and watch $1.15 as the ceiling that needs to break with strong volume, ideally above that 1.81 billion average, for real momentum to return. Don't get shaken out by scheduled escrow releases that happen every single month like clockwork, and don't expect good regulatory news alone to move price without the charts actually confirming it with volume and structure. Patience here isn't weakness, it's strategy. If this breakdown actually helped you understand what's happening underneath the surface, do me a favor and hit that like button. It genuinely helps this channel reach more people who need this kind of clear, honest analysis instead of hype. Subscribe to XRP Future Finance so you don't miss the next update the moment either of these levels breaks. And I want to hear from you directly. Drop a comment and tell me which level you think breaks first, $1.11 or $1.15, and why. I read every single comment, and I'll see you in the next video.